Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Lucy Pringle, a partner in the commercial office, in the commercial team in the London office. Welcome to our launch event of Thrive, our new women's network. We're delighted to be joined by you all today. To kick off, I'm going to dazzle you with some facts and figures. We have over 250 people signed up to this event across all of our offices today, which is absolutely amazing. That is the highest ever turnout to an internal event. And when we ran our pulse survey earlier in the year, 96% of respondents were in favour of us setting up a network dedicated to supporting women's career development. And that's testament to the amount of support we have in the business for this initiative, and also perhaps how much people consider that it's needed. So how are we going to run today's session? We're not expecting any fire alarms in the offices for those who are in, so if there is one, you know what to do. We'll have some time for questions and comments at the end of the session, so please use the chat function if you're joining online, or if you're in the office, make yourself known to the office lead, who'll then unmute your office and you can pose your question to us at the end. Alternatively, the panel are available. We have a networking lunch at the end, so go and have a chat to one of them. So, why have we set up Thrive and what do we want to achieve? Jo and I want to start with a personal message, to share our experiences of being women in a law firm and to explain why we're passionate about promoting gender diversity. When I was a junior lawyer in the business, I didn't really feel I had any female role models. But neither did I feel I was treated any differently for being a woman. I didn't perceive there to be any barriers to me being a woman, but I did wonder where all those senior women were. Where were those role models? Fast forward 10 years, I had my first child and came back from maternity leave, and suddenly it felt like there were barriers everywhere to me staying in the business and to me achieving progress. I was lucky. I had some support from some fantastic people who helped me overcome those barriers, and I knew that I was in something of a unique position. I had support from the right people and I had the right platform to say, this doesn't work for me, we need to do things differently. But I hated the fact that there must be umpteen other women in the business who didn't have that same support or didn't feel able to tackle those barriers. Jo, what about you?
I'm Jo Beattie-Edwards. I'm a recently promoted partner in the real estate team in Southampton. I've been at Wombles since I started my training contract in 1998, and I want to tell you about how I want us to enable women at WBD to achieve their ambitions. So what about me? Well, I've worked part-time for 20 years, and my hours have changed as my families have grown. Like Lucy, when I came back from maternity leave, work felt really different. The office hadn't changed, but I had. Of the few senior women around me that I respected at the time, none really showed that they were living their lives in the way that I wanted to live mine. Other women I trained with were leaving the business, and I felt like there was one person inside my head, a bit confused about what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, and another person I was projecting on the outside. I want to build a network that will support all of our women through all of the stages of their work journeys, allowing us to be honest about how we're feeling and where we're heading, and to feel supported however we choose to progress, or not. And it's also really important to understand, for all of us, life is rarely straightforward, and we all need some support as we hit bumps in the road. Both Lucy and I have seen the successes that have come from having supportive people around us, and we want to make sure that every single one of us has a network that we can rely on. And if you don't have one already, that's what we're offering you with Thrive. Lucy, what are the risks if we don't do things differently?
Well, we've both mentioned the barriers we've overcome to get where we have today and what we want to do differently for the benefit of women at WBD. Because who knows how many talented women we've lost from the business because they didn't have the right support around them. We want to create a forum so that women can be heard and gain strength through a collective voice. So that's what we're offering you with Thrive. 65% of our business is female. So if we can do a better job of supporting, retaining and promoting even some of that 65%, We'll have an even stronger, more motivated group of women in the business, and we'll also have a much stronger business. So Jo, tell us, what is Thrive? What does it look and feel like?
So Lucy and I are co-leading Thrive with Jane Freeman, and alongside us we have an amazing panel of women. You've seen their photos earlier, many of them are in the room with you now, and we're all working together to achieve some objectives we've set ourselves. We know that there's also a wealth of enthusiasm out there, and we're going to be rolling out a single programme of events delivered nationally, like today, but with an office presence. We think there are huge benefits of getting together if we can. Thrive is open to all, but is focused on women. We're aiming for 4 events a year, and for each event we're going to tell you what we're going to be talking about, what we hope to achieve, and who we think will benefit most. We're going to deal with issues that we identify through our own network working groups, whether that's gender pay gap, whether that's barriers for women, or other things. Like today, we'll always have a structured event, an element to it, and that will be recorded for anyone that can't join in person. And then we'll have some networking opportunities, some roundtable discussions, and each one will be thoughtfully managed to make sure that anybody who wants to participate can do. We really hope you've already seen our intranet page and visited it. If you've been there, you'll see that it shows you how you can join our Teams channel, and there's a wealth of resources, podcasts, books and articles that you can look at as well. And please do email us via the link on the page if you have any other great suggestions. So Lucy, we've talked about barriers, barriers women can experience in the workplace, but what about our strengths?
Absolutely. Well, there's compelling evidence about the strengths and value that women can bring to the workplace, and how improving diversity at all levels, and particularly at a senior level, can bring significant and tangible benefits to business, including revenue growth, improved retention, and more robust decision making. So here to tell us more about the unique strengths that women can offer to WBD, we are delighted to introduce our keynote speaker for today, Lillian Ogbogoh, who is a trainer, mentor, and coach. Lillian will give us an insight into the female archetypes and how they can help to problem solve or find a new perspective. Lillian's going to demonstrate how women can use the archetypes to build stronger connections and networks, embrace the ability to fail forward, and fully embody the leader that lies within. So without further ado, Lillian, over to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you for having me. So I would need to be able to share my slides. So can we make that happen? Thank you.
You should be able to press share at the top.
No, I need to have control to be able to share.
2 seconds. Has that now worked?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you. Okay, so for me, understanding the archetypes, we're going to look at the various archetypes, but I'm only going to focus for this talk, we're only going to focus on just 3. So, and I'm going to look at the feminine archetypes and how to create your own inner wisdom council. So here's my outline for today. It's understanding the archetypes, discovering the success tactics that each archetype brings to the table, and explore how to create your own inner wisdom council to silence the inner negative voices that have you sometimes very reluctant to take risk, have you believing that you're not good enough or you're the imposter in the room. So I don't need to go through my introduction again, so thank you for that. So what are archetypes? Does anybody have an answer on what an archetype is or isn't? So I don't see any hands up or anything in the chat. So let's go into this very briefly. So archetypes exist in the world at large. According to Carl Jung, archetypes are defined as images, themes that are derived from the collective unconscious. What that simply means that they exist in every part of life, regardless of culture, race, regardless of religion. They kind of show up in different ways from our literature, art, or religion. And archetypes show up as things that we all equally and immediately recognized. So the word lawyer itself is an archetype because that conjures up an imagery. So when people think of lawyers, you think, it depends on what your first interaction with a lawyer is, you think this person who stands for truth, for justice, defending those who are incapable of defending themselves, who are able to speak eloquently and pull out this magic from a hat to prove their client's innocence. That's my version of a lawyer, because my first interaction with lawyers was Perry Mason and Matlock growing up as a kid. And so that in itself, a lawyer is an archetype: father, mother, nurturer, carer, woman. Our gendered self is an archetype and how we show up. And so when we start thinking of the word archetype, we get to understand, what does that mean? What does that mean to us? The broader perspective of tapping into each different archetype or persona. And this is going into, how do we lead as women? How do we show up? And this, going back into this work, is like, when we understand the different personas, what they bring to the table allows us to show up. Now, for women, we show up in multitudes of ways, whether we are the nurturer, the inner child, the queen archetype, the lover archetype, the one who is able to create from nothing, the creatrix, the dreamer. There are various ways that we show up. Now, for the purpose of this exercise, we're going to look at what we call the foundational aspects of the feminine persona. So we're going to look at the inner child, the nurturer, and the queen. So let's take a quick look at the inner child. Now, this inner child, she sees the world as limitless. She's the one who's open to meeting new people, making new friends. If you remember yourself as a child, how you showed up, how you presented the world, children are born fearless. They do not, and they have the ability to attract and build friends. They're the ones who are looking for the easiest way to get things done. That inner child perspective. She is the one who is thinking, well, if I can do this, what else can I do? She is that child who will take no for an answer. And for those of you who happen to be parents in the room, will recognize the tenacity of children. They have a way that if they want something, they have a singular objective, and they are relentless in their pursuit of that objective. This is the part of the inner child that sometimes we leave behind when we show up in the world, because we're taught outside of ourselves, where we have experiences that diminish and dim our fire, our perspective, who we are. And that is one of the things that, those things that we believe that we are meant to leave behind as we grow from childhood into womanhood, into this person in an industry, in the workplace, are what are actually the super skills of the inner child that we actually need on a day-to-day basis. She is the one that wants to build networks, who wants to lead networks. She is the one that reminds you about how to practice flexibility and resilience, because children have this ability to bounce back very quickly. Children have the ability to recover. They are more resilient than we actually give them credit for. Everything for them is up for negotiation. I mean, you've seen encounters with parents in stores where the child is like, I'm going home with this. The mom is like, or dad is like, no. The child is like, yes. And the parent only has yes or no. The child has a gamut to run of scenarios that they're going to play out till the parent gives in. Children have this tenacity that we need as women on a day-to-day to really stop tapping back into. She is the one that is focused on play, joy, ways to nurture yourself to prevent burnout. She reminds you about how to prioritize what gives you joy. For some of you, your career has been part of your joy. For some of you, you've taken a different road and you've now come back to your career and you're like, how can I create this career so it balances out with my life? So I don't suffer burnout. I don't put myself in a position where I do not feel like I can contribute any longer to this profession. This is where the inner child is actually quite useful, because this is where she starts reminding you about those things, about your hobbies, about practices that can keep you from burning out. And that's one of the success tactics of the inner child. And then when we move forward, and this is a quote by Karen Russell where she talks about self-discipline is necessary, but it's so is playfulness, flexibility, and joy. Because when you stop demanding perfection of yourself, your writing desk will become a spacious place. This applies to writers, lawyers, doctors. When we create that joy for ourselves, when we create room for us to think differently, act differently, then our workplace becomes a little bit more joyous. And then we're going to look at the queen. She is that centering force. Now, some people have objections with the term queen, and I go, she is also known as the boss. She is the female lead. She's the female leadership within all of us as women. She is the one that has mastered her strategic vision and empowers her team to implement it. She has a purpose and is unafraid to take calculated risks. She is composed and dependable. Now, one of the things as women, and I understand that your career and your work that you do is such that you feel that you have to project yourself as perfect all the time. You have to make sure that you are always perfect. And for some of you, you're chasing perfection that will never come. And so you're sitting down feeling that because you do not feel perfect, then there is something wrong. You are imperfect, and therefore you are the imposter in the room. Everybody has it more together than you. Everybody understands more than you. Everybody's taking this particular action in a particular way, and therefore you are the odd person out. The thing about the queen, and this is her lesson that she brings, is that she is fully aware of her function. She is fully aware of the power within her. She understands her confidence and self-esteem are two different things. She understands that she will be confident in certain areas and sometimes less confident in certain areas. And those things that she is not comfortable with at the moment does not determine her worth, nor does it tie into who she is on a day-to-day basis. She has a supreme sense of who she is and how she wants to show up. One of the key things about this archetype is that she's unafraid to fail, because she understands this very much, that failure is part of growth. Failure means you're taking risk, and failure means that you're putting yourself in a position to learn. So here are the success tactics of the queen. The queen reminds you of your worth. The queen actually gives you evidence, because here it is from a neurological standpoint. What we've found that from how you actually present yourself is how your brain actually gives you the information. So if you're going around having inner conversations and inner dialogues with yourself that sounds something along the line, I am not good enough. Oh God, what I did in this meeting was rather stupid. I've destroyed my chances of becoming partner. I have done this, I've done that. The brain is actually quite an immense tool. It is one of the largest computing tools at a quantum level. But the problem is the brain is not a problem solver. It will give you answers. We've made the brain the seat of our knowledge, but actually what it does, it's like a repository of information. So when you put in, oh my God, I'm not good enough. Oh my God, I am stupid. What the brain will do is go back into your filing cabinet of memories and pull out all the memories that you have. So it will find that memory of you at 10 when you fell down in front of the school, or when you had to give your first speech and you stumbled over the words and you found it impossible. Your brain will go back and go, yeah, you are not good enough, but take a look at this, take a look at that, take a look at this. And the more you do that, the more you start to actually embody and believe that, and your brain will give you more and more. And then you start creating a biological feedback in your own body to actually believe that this is actually true. So the queen, that leader self, reminds you that this is not the case and puts a brake on those thoughts and actually gives you tools to actually remind you, well, yes, you may have done this in this scenario, but look at what you went on to do. Look at how you've recovered. Look at what you've gone and who you've impacted. She reminds you the power of making decisive decisions, because one of the things that actually leaves us as women in leadership unsure is indecisiveness. She reminds you on taking those decisive decisions. She points out that perfection is an illusion, and because perfection is always pushing that goalpost. There's never, I've arrived at perfection. You're always struggling to go, if I do this, then I'm worthy. If I do this, then it's perfect. It's never, well, you get there, but you move the goalpost once again. And so what happens is that the queen actually says, this is the goalpost. This is where we're going to stick it. And then gives you room to actually see your accomplishment and what you have achieved. She empowers others to step into leadership. In fact, Thrive right now is doing exactly just that. It's creating a space for other women to be supported on their leadership journey. And that is the backbone of what the Queen is here for. So this is my favorite quote by Oprah Winfrey. She goes, think like a queen. A queen is not afraid to fail. Failure is another stepping stone to greatness. And just before I end the queen very briefly, we can look at the career of the queen. Now, despite whether you're a royalist or not, but you can see that this is a woman who had to learn on the job. And whenever she made a mistake, she learned, she took that mistake, took the lessons, and approach the problem in a different way. A queen gives you different perspective. So let's move on to our final archetype for today. And we're going to look at the nurturer, who is the cultivator. This is the one that gets the best out of people, thus creating high performance cultures. The nurturer holds and nurtures the greatness of others into being. Now, just for those who are not women in the room, these archetypes show up in both men and women. So whether you are presenting as a man or you present as a gendered other, these archetypes show up. So it shows up across the genders. So you can be a nurturer, you can have the king energy or queen energy, you can have the inner child. This is not just for women. So the nurturer is the one that basically nurtures things to life, whether it's a team, a child, a business, a community. They nurture, they bring out the best. So the thing about the nurturer, they're the ones who are going to look for what inspires their teams. They're going to encourage the people that they care for, whether in their teams or in their family, in a way that supports their growth and development. They're going to be the ones to provide tools, provide techniques, provide new ways to push each and every one of them out of their comfort zone so that they experience growth. That is the role of the nurturer. And one of the success tactics that the nurturer brings, and let's go to the success tactic. And I have Marissa Mayer, who talks about in technologies about people, getting the best people, retaining them, nurturing their creative environment, and helping to find a way to innovate. The nurturer is your innovators. If you think of Richard Branson, he's a nurturer. He nurtured a whole gamut of different people to create his different branches of his business, because prior to them, he had very little knowledge on how to run an airline, let alone how to pilot a plane. So he had to nurture the skills of his team. He had to nurture this new environment that he was creating by pulling in the best and brightest and ensuring that they were taken care of. Now, the nurturer is the one that reminds you to nurture your team. You are the one that moves from mentor to sponsor with ease. You are the one that leads with compassion, your desire to be of service, making sure that you are the best person to mentor. But also, one of the things as a nurturer, we always think it's the external, we are taking care of others. The nurturer, our success tactic for the nurturer for us is to remind us to take care of us. When was the last time you put your own desire, want, or need on that table? When did you actually mentor yourself to say, I'm going to decide that this is what I'm going to do? When was the last time you had time to look at your own goals? You're really great at rallying others for a common cause. You know the right way to support those around you. And the nurturer always says, yes, this is great. And now it's time to turn that inwards, so that we understand what we require, remind us what matters, so we're not driven to overwhelm and burnout. So just out of the three that we've discussed today, we have, in terms of foundational feminine archetypes, I've mentioned them at the beginning. So we have the lover, we have the mother, we have the nurturer, we have the queen, we have the alchemist, we have the warrioress. We have so many different, these foundational archetypes. The reason why we want to actually know them, and understand what they bring to our table is so they make up our inner wisdom council. So our inner wisdom council is simply tapping into the positive traits of these archetypes that we've identified and using the intelligence to problem solve, find a new perspective, or help you imagine a new way to create, for those who are creators, or for those who are having a particular problem. How do I deal with this problem from the perspective of a child? How do I look at, in terms of my child self, how do I start thinking more resiliently? How do I create better networks? How do I network? For those of you who are sitting in the rooms virtually and in person, some of you might be feeling networking is hard. I find it a challenge because you say, I'm introverted, I do not like networking, or this feels uncomfortable. The inner child reminds us that we actually can network, and there's a way that you can network that suits you. So to be a networker, you don't have to network like everybody else. You can network as you. And this is understanding, again, that for those who are introverts in the room, the inner child asks you to go, well, what is your unique skills? In networking, we need more introverts in the room because they are the ones who are the observers. They're the ones who want to ask pertinent questions. They're the ones that want to build connections and network that is deeper than just let me ask all the questions in the room and find out who everybody is and take a bunch of business cards. They're the ones looking to build lasting networks. So it's understanding that the inner child will ask of you to tap into what is uniquely you. So when we access our inner wisdom council, and the concept of the inner wisdom council is not new. This came about from the first time this was actually documented was by the author of Think and Grow Rich, who talks about how he used the inner wisdom council before he took any important decision. So in terms of that, he imagined that he sat at a table and he pulls together the great men of old at his time that had wisdom. For him, it was Abraham Lincoln, it was Henry Ford, it was a few of those people that he thought were his peers and more. And he will sit to ask them questions to get clarity on the problem, to understand where you're stuck. It's actually, from a neurological perspective, it's called perceptual positioning, where you actually start looking at problems from different perspectives. You start looking at problems from different perspectives and asking yourself, where do you feel stuck? What do you mean when you said X, Y, and Z? And how does that impact you? How does that impact others? So really and truthfully, the whole concept of accessing your inner wisdom council is really asking yourself, your council of experts, how can I deal with this particular problem? For those who find themselves in a position feeling like they are the imposter in the room, is asking your inner wisdom council, where am I feeling like an imposter? What specifically? How so? For them to give you different perspective to help quell that noise. So this is where the inner wisdom council becomes very, very useful in quieting your inner critic voice. So one of the ways that happens is, first of all, when you draw up that inner wisdom council, and whether you draw up your council of the inner child, the queen, the nurturer, or you decide to draw up other individuals, the first thing you want to do with them is recognize the difference between your inner negative voice and your inner wisdom council. So for this, there are ways of doing this, and understanding how do we differentiate that voice, because sometimes when those voices come up, we automatically assume it's our voice. We automatically assume that these thoughts are true to us, and so therefore they must be the truth. So is to recognize the difference. And when you're having one of those moments, is to grab a notebook or a loose sheet of paper and draw a line down the middle of a page. Write down what's coming up. So write down some of these critical negative thoughts that you've recently had, such as, I'm not good enough to get that client. I can't speak at that event. I don't do well at networking, whatever that's come up for you recently. And then actually start to run a filter. So once you start doing that, give yourself a few minutes to get them all down. And then on the right side of the page, what you want to do is change the thoughts into the second person tense. So instead of I am, you're going to go for you are not good enough to get that client. You cannot speak at that event. You are bad at networking. Then start asking yourself the question after reading the right side. How does it feel? Does it feel like somebody else's voice? Does it feel hurtful? Does it make you feel off balance and scared? Now, the biggest litmus test, if somebody spoke to you or somebody you actually cared about in that manner, would it be acceptable to you? And does it feel like a personal attack? And the final question you ask, again, run it through the filter of your inner wisdom council, is whose voice is it? For some of us, we will find that that voice is a teacher from high school. It's a parent. It's a family friend. It's a lecturer at university, your first boss, your first team lead. You will find that those voices, you're able to break them out and differentiate from what is true. And then you will find that your inner wisdom council would not speak to you like that, because your inner wisdom council will not make you feel afraid, scared, hurt, or feel like a personal attack, because your inner wisdom, your own personal inner wisdom is there to support you to take bigger steps, to remind you to take risks. Your inner wisdom council is part of that team that says, okay, let's look at new ways of doing this. And yes, you may fail, but you're going to get back up. So the next way to actually filter when you have those words coming through is to what I call question the noise. So when you question the noise, you're going to actually question what is coming through. And there's 4 ways to do this. And that is when you're really activating this inner wisdom council, is to ask, whatever is coming up, when was the last time you actually questioned, is it true? Can you absolutely know that it's true? How do you react, and what happens when you believe that thought? What happens to you physiologically? What happens to you? How do you feel? What are the thoughts that you have after it? And then the final question is, who would you be without that thought? And then when we move on, we want to understand that. So I'm going to come back onto the main screen and ask, has anybody actually ever had those thoughts that come up? When was the last time you questioned them? And how did you feel if you've ever questioned them? Do you actually honestly believe all the things that you think are true? Who would you be if you didn't believe them? And so in the wrap up, we have room for questions about the inner wisdom council and the archetypes.
Lillian, I think we will wrap up with one final section, and then we'll do questions in the round at the end, if that's okay.
That's brilliant.
Okay.
Sorry, quickly. Lillian, can you pull down your slides, please? We've just got a couple more.
Okay, yeah, sure, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lillian. That was really interesting. We've got people from all across our business joining us today. We've got lawyers, we've got business services professionals, we've got people at all levels of our business. Some of you will identify as leaders, some of you won't feel like you have a leadership role in our business, but hopefully there was something in Lillian's archetypes that resonated with you today, something that helps you feel empowered to achieve your own potential, something you can take away and support others with, and that's what Thrive is all about. So we have one final section to wrap up, and then we're going to open up the debate. We're going to ask you to put your questions to Lillian, or if you might have questions for Joe and I about Thrive. So just to conclude the formal part of today, we wanted to leave you with one more personal message. Someone asked me a few weeks ago what had driven me to set up Thrive, and I knew the answer instantly. For both Joe and me, it's these women you're about to see coming up on your screen and others in the business. These are some of the women that we think are fantastic, we care about, we want our firm to be a better place for them to work. We want them to be able to achieve their potential with fewer barriers than we faced.
All of you attending today, no matter what role, what level, or what team you're in, you will have your own important women like we do. And whoever you are, there is something that you can do to support another woman in our business. We are so delighted to have launched Thrive today. We see Thrive as the outside edge pieces of the jigsaw. And you are all the rest of our pieces. We need to put all of those pieces together, make the perfect picture. Whichever archetype you identify with, as we finish here today, please think about what we can each do to change the status quo. Because as President of the Law Society said, women still face unacceptable barriers in the workplace that prevent them from reaching as far as their talent and ability should otherwise take them. And that applies to every person in business. Thank you for coming along to support Thrive. We're amazed, delighted with the numbers of you that are joining us. We'll share information with you after this about how to join our Teams channel, and we're going to be asking you to make a pledge about what you can do to make a difference. Thank you so much to everyone that's joined. Thank you to Lillian. We've got some time for questions now, and then for anyone in the office, please do join us for some networking and some lunch afterwards. So let's hand over to Joe, who's going to let us know if there's any questions, and then we'll come round to each office in turn. So please make your questions known to your panel representative, who hopefully is in charge of your remote control.
There's no questions as of yet that I can see, so open it up to each of the rooms in case there are questions there.
As we said, we're very happy to talk about them in smaller groups later on. We know that actually it's quite a large group to ask questions in. Are there any questions in any of the rooms?
Well, Bristol seem to be moving.
We've got a question in Bristol.
Hopefully you can hear me.
Can you hear us okay in Bristol?
We can hear you, Bristol. Yeah.
Okay. So is the network open to both lawyers and business services professionals? And if so, which I think it is, how are you going to ensure that you support both of those groups in the right way?
Thank you. Really great question. I'm sorry I couldn't see who asked that, but thank you for the question. We are 100% open to all women in the firm, business services and lawyers, and anybody that doesn't fall into either of those groups. Our panel, as you'll hopefully seen at the beginning, or if not, we're going to put the screen, when we finish talking, we're going to put up the panel slide again to show you all the people that were involved. Our panel is made up of a really good cross-section of people from both business services and legal teams, and so they will be working on your behalf to make sure that there are events that are open to everyone. I talked about events over the year, and we've very deliberately talked about pushing events towards certain groups of people. So we might look, for example, at a particular category that might be more relevant to business services or might be more relevant to lawyers. We'll explain that before each session so that you can feel happy that the ones that you come along to are really good use of your time. You'll be welcome to all of them, but we will try and focus them to make sure there's a good cross-section of topics, that they're hopefully interesting to anyone. And please, please, please use the email on our Thrive channel if you've got ideas of things you would like to see. Please do let us know. We will look at all of those. And if, as we go forward, if there's extra ideas or if you think we're taking the wrong direction, this is our network. So please help us to make sure that we are being supportive of everyone.
Thanks, Jo.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions in Edinburgh? I'm really sorry, you're small on the screen. Ooh.
Hello. Yes, I think if you can hear us, we do have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
We can hear you. Yeah,
Great.
So the first one is for Lillian, I think, and that was, can you tell us a bit about the difference between an archetype and a stereotype?
So an archetype is an arc in terms of it's something that exists across from literature all the way, and you recognize it across. Now, a stereotype is something that's been crafted about a particular set of people to say this is how they show up. So stereotypical points of how a woman behaves, that is constructed. Whereas an archetype is something that is instantly recognizable across culture, whether we have the same words for it, but it's something that people instantly recognize. Whereas stereotypes it's always something that is negatively connotated about a grouping of people. I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And then our other question was about the group of women that was shown on the slide right at the end for Lucy and Jo, when you said straight away I had an answer, I knew who we wanted to show. Can you tell us a little bit about that group and why they were chosen?
So they are people that we work with, and they are not an exclusionary group of fantastic women in the firm by any stretch of the imagination, and hopefully we got that message across. But the message we did want to put across is that this is something that we all have to take responsibility for. So Jo and I have women that we want to champion. We want them to be successful. We work with them day to day, and we think they have got great potential. But you will all have your own women, not just sort of people that are less senior than you, that you feel like you can influence their career, but there'll also be women who are more senior than you who can similarly benefit from your support. You might say to them, thank you, I think you did a really great job of that. You gave me great feedback. I thought it was really inspiring the way you led that meeting or whatever. We can all have a role in supporting women at all levels across the business, and that's kind of one of the messages we want to get across with Thrive. Some of it is about empowering yourself and what you can do to overcome your own barriers, but some of it is how we can all support each other and taking collective responsibility for that. So they were our women. There's lots of other women in the business that we also care about, but we just picked a handful, and you will all have your own women. So think about who they are and think about what you could do differently to support them to achieve their potential. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Thank you very much. Oh, and one final really important question. Is there going to be any sort of Thrive Christmas we've been asked?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Could you say that one again?
Oh, sorry. We were wondering, is there going to be any kind of Thrive Christmas celebration? Put you on the spot there. Sorry, Lucy.
We will definitely be celebrating Christmas across all of the offices and with all of our colleagues in all places. But maybe we can arrange one of our networking events around the right time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Edinburgh. Lovely to see you.
Newcastle.
Is there anyone in Newcastle?
Yeah, we have David.
Yeah, it links to what you were just saying there, Lucy, about what we can all do to support the group. I wondered, as a male ally in the group, what can we do to support Thrive?
Brilliant question. So I guess taking a step back from that, we probably could benefit from explaining how we see the network being applicable to men, what role we would like men to play in the network. So we were very careful to take a sounding in the Pulse survey about whether people thought that Thrive should be exclusive to women or open to everybody. And the clear message that came back is it should be open to everybody, but focused on women. And we were delighted with that because we think that's absolutely the right answer. So we will have the best conversations if we have all genders represented in those conversations. Some of the topics that we cover will be relevant to men and women. You know, there's a great example would be imposter syndrome. So we did, as a firm, we did some imposter syndrome training recently. That is not something that we would run through Thrive because it's not just an issue that affects women. But there are issues that do affect women more commonly than men, and so that's why it's appropriate for Thrive to focus on supporting women. But we don't want to shut men out of the room because we acknowledge that some of that will be relevant to them. And you know, I always say I'm not a feminist, I'm an equalist, because unless we can achieve equality, unless everybody's working on the same basis, then we will never achieve equality. So it's really important that we don't sort of badge things as women's issues and men's issues. Some of our events, we think it will be appropriate to limit those to women. So a good example is we're looking into running a speed mentoring event where you can, you know, sort of book a slot with a senior woman and ask for their perspective on something, ask for their advice. We are going to limit that to a female event, but others will be open to everybody. So I think coming back to your question, sorry, this is a very long-winded way to get around to your question, David, but the male allies have a really important role because we want male allies to help drive traffic to the network, encourage men to participate in our events, say to them, you know, remind them of those messages I've just given to you, which is that Thrive is not exclusively for women, and we'll all get much better benefits out of it if we have men in the conversation. And there will be stuff that's relevant to you, you know, whether it's barriers that you face, or it could be thinking about how you support the women in your team, you know, thinking about that slide, who are the women in your working life that you want to champion and empower, and thinking about how you can understand the barriers they might be facing in order to give them that support.
Just to pick on one of the points that Lucy's made, so one of our working groups of the 3 that we have within our panel is to look at barriers. And what we will be doing over the next 3 months is to have some working parties to try and work out what we think those barriers are. We're not naive enough to think we can tick all of those off in the next year, but what we will be doing is identifying those and then using our male allies to help us to work through actually, if there are some in there that would benefit from training from everybody, how would that be best done? If they're ones that would be best trained for women or for people who are particularly affected by a barrier, be they male, female or non-binary, then we want to aim the training in that way. So thank you for being a male ally. We really appreciate that. We do have a male allies list, and if you'd like to be added to that, then please again email us via the link, or we'll email Lucy and I. And we are going to be sounding board as we go through, because this is about making sure that everybody achieves their potential, and if we can help everybody along the way, then you know, job done. We're happy.
Thank you. Has anyone else got any more questions in Newcastle? No. Thank you.
Thank you, Newcastle. I feel slightly Eurovision-y. Are there any questions in Southampton?
Oh, sorry, we've just got one come through the chat for Lillian. Do you have any tips as to how to deal with your rational and instinctive response being different in any given situation? Oh, you're on mute, I think.
Shall we go to Southampton and then come back to Lillian in a moment? Was there any questions in Southampton? No pressure, anything, none, that's fine.
At the moment.
No, thank you, Naomi. Valid thoughts. Leeds, I believe you're a small group in Leeds, given the office change round, but is there anyone in Leeds that wanted to say anything or make a comment? I'm going to take that as a no from Leeds. So then London, I think. Anyone in London? Nope. And I'm just going to go to Plymouth quickly just to see if there was anyone there before we go to Lex, who's put their hand up.
I'm Lex from Leeds, but actually at home today.
Brilliant. Hello,
Hi.
Lex from Leeds.
You were talking about kind of the objectives that you're going to set for Thrive, and how are they going to be measurable? Is there going to be the data available, kind of the tangible metrics in which to put these against? Because it's quite difficult to say how successful is mentoring quite early on in the early on in a program of mentoring, but moving things forward, it's just really how is that going to be measured, and where is that data going to come from, and how is it going to be used and shared?
That's a really good question, and it's definitely one that we exercise or have been exercising ourselves over for the last year as we've been working through this process of getting to today. The first thing I would say is we have some brilliant people on our panel. Jenny LG being one of those who is all over the data, and we have some amazing people from the HR team who have been providing us with information and data that we have so far. So there are some things that we can measure, and we will be measuring as we go over time and challenging ourselves as to what difference we're making. But you're right. There are some things, aren't there, that are a feeling, that are the way that people perceive the workplace and the people that they work with, and those are really difficult to measure in numbers. So we will certainly be running more pulse surveys as we go through, and we will be using that information to sort of track some progress over time. Again, it might not be a measurable number, but how are people feeling? Are people feeling that the education opportunities that they have, that the training, that the people around them are developing? So we'll be using some objective targets and some a bit more subjective targets, and trying to measure those as best we can as we go through. Lucy?
Yeah, I think a couple of examples just to put some flesh on the bones of what Joe said. So gender pay gap, we can measure with metrics. We have a gender pay gap subgroup already active. They've been working very closely with David Wood in HR to really dig behind, why there is that gap there, and to try to inform whether there's anything we can do differently. So that's a good example of something we can measure tangibly. Another good example, our business has adopted the Mansfield rule. So the Mansfield certification involves for 70% of your roles, so whether that's promotions or lateral hires, you have to choose from a 30% diverse group. You don't have to select a diverse person for that role, but you have to make sure your pool of candidates is 30% diverse. And so measurement against the Mansfield rule and that certification is another really good example of a tangible that can be measured in terms of how we're making progress as a business. And as Joe says, other ones will just be about how people feel. And there's no way for us to measure that except coming back to you all with a pulse survey and saying, do you feel any differently? Do you feel any better? Do you feel any better supported? Do you feel any more empowered? Have you done anything differently? Have you supported somebody differently because of what we have done through Thrive? And the only way we'll know that is by you telling us.
That's great.
But we do. Thank you. It's a really good question, and we know from talking, and we've been doing work outside of the network and talking to businesses and clients, and we know from them that they found their networks really useful. So we're going to have some things coming up in the future, and we can talk to you about how they found some benefits that have come through, and then we can work out how quantifiable they are. That was a great question. I think probably, can we go back to Lillian?
We should be able to, yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
On that. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Lillian. We'll hand over to you for the final question.
Okay, so Chris, that's a great question. And we are instinctively thought that being different is problematic. And so we either want to hide, we want to blend in, because if we go back to our history, where being different meant we were excommunicated from our tribe, and it was dangerous. It was dangerous. It meant, in some cases, death. But right now, being different is part of your unique superpower. It's part of what makes you you. So bringing that difference will allow for a difference in thought. That instantly says, I don't think like you. And that is not a bad thing. So you're bringing diversity of thought. Being different then says, okay, I see things differently, so let's try something else, which then gives birth to new ideas, new innovation. And yes, our first instinct of when we are different, and if we go back to secondary school and being in school, when you are different, you are picked on. I can give you a classic example. When I went to school, because I sounded different, I was picked on, I was laughed at. And then I realized that being different wasn't so bad, because I always ended up with the parts of being the narrator for our Shakespeare plays. And so that became part of my core superpower, is understanding, what does your difference bring? Are you bringing a different way of seeing things? Are you bringing a different way of understanding? Are you actually bringing a different way of supporting Chris? And I'm making the assumption with the names here, Chris. If you are a man, are you going to support somebody differently in your team? Are you going to make sure that your way is now that you're thinking about things differently? It's like, well, if a woman on my team is being interrupted in meetings, what am I going to do differently? How do I support her? Does it mean that I have to make allowances and make sure that I make room to be a sponsor and a mentor and understanding the difference? Because your difference is going to be the difference in how people start to think, in changing the direction of your team and how they grow. So yes, half the time we want to blend in and fit in, but I say embrace your difference and look at where it lends itself to being a superpower. I hope that answers the question.
Whether or not I answered the question, Lillian, I'm inspired, 100%.
Yeah, I love that answer.
Brilliant.
You.
So I'm going to say thank you so much to you all for coming. Again, we appreciate it. Please do join us for networking. If you're in the office, you now see our fantastic panel up on the screen who are open for questions, emails and so on afterwards. We'll finish spot on time and look forward to the next event. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
We've got